floor is open for any question because the minister has touched on so many. Yes, please.
Thank you. Christian Agenzuki with the World Bank. So we will try and keep responding. I just wanted to ask two things, if I may. Now at the beginning of your time, as you mentioned, trade as a share of India's GDP is relatively small. Do you have a vision for where you'd like it to be at the end of your time, a few years down the road? And the second question is perhaps a little more specific, which is that last year in response to the food crisis, there were several export restraints, export bans on food that were implemented. I wanted to hear your views on those sorts of measures. Thank you.
This is the first part. Our share of exports to GDP has increased in the last 1 decade from 17% to over 30%. Last few months it has seen a fall. When we are talking of living in a globalized society and interconnected world, it's true that a country which is where the industry, manufacturing industry is fast expanding. I refer to the human resources and the availability of skills. And we would like Indian trade also to go up, and it has to be two-way trade, because there are many things which India imports. If you look at our engagement with the world, the balance of trade is there, even with America. Unlike what US may have with other countries, big countries, but with India, there is a fair balance of trade which is there. Coming to your second question about exports in food grains. We had only given partial permissions, and that too was a conscious decision following the SOSs which we received when there was great food crisis, and this was not for any profit, from African countries. The only exports that have taken place recently have been of rice to export to African countries who were in dire need. Food is availability of food security is a major issue. I was referring to inclusive growth, because when I refer to this huge middle class of India, which is, I gave the numbers, so that's there. But we are also home to a large number of poor people. That's the paradox. We have been able to take out tens of millions of our people out of poverty, but tens of millions remain. Even if 25% of them are there, then that is 300 million, close to 300 million people. It's a huge number. So we have a dedicated food security program for the poor people, where on a monthly basis, a determined quantity of rice, wheat, pulses is made available at a subsidized rate. So that is one issue. But surely, I feel that we need to increase our productivity. We will not allow what is lying in our godowns or storage houses to rot. We will share with others. We have been sharing. I was urging friends here to look at India to invest in cold chains, in storage, in food processing. There's enormous potential. That will be value addition. Also, it will add to the global food availability. Because what perishes in India, if it is available in global markets. So we are open. It has to be not, I would not like to look at only from the very narrow prism of export. I will take a macro view as to what to do with what we produce, what we need, our people need, and what we do not, what is in excess. How do we share it in a meaningful manner with the rest of the world? So that we will.
Yes, at the microphone in the back.
Oh, hello, sir. This is.
Please proceed.
Sir, this is Eric Watson from Inside U.S. Trade. Sir, you mentioned H-1B visas and also the Indian jewelry sector, which benefits from trade preferences here. I was wondering if you could tell the audience a little bit about whether you brought those issues up with USTR Kirk and Secretary Locke, or what other bilateral issues you may have discussed. And also, you mentioned your commitment to breaking the logjam or impasse in the Doha round, re-energizing it. I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about how you see that logjam. Is it a procedural problem? Do you see a way in which a compromise might be accomplished on agricultural safeguards, for example? Is India willing to shift its position? I think many people in the audience probably want to hear more about the substance of that. Thank you.
First of all, I did discuss all these issues on H-1B visas, as well as the contribution which the gems and jewelry sector makes, and as to why it should be on the GSP, because it creates a lot of jobs in India, but also in this country. We have the statistics which can be made available by the Indian Embassy. On the second issue, I would not like to, put my finger on one issue or the other. I did talk about multilateral negotiations, countries coming from different levels of development, different kinds of challenges, aspirations, but coming together to find a common meeting ground, and that is what makes me optimistic that we can sit together. I would not like to say X or Y was the cause. There was non-convergence on many issues. You heard me when I said right in the beginning that we respect different perspectives and differences. If we do not hear each other, if we do not try to understand each other, then that harmony of the middle ground will elude us. That is what we will try to find.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Anthony Johnson, Ambassador to Jamaica. First of all, congratulations on your excellent performance in the economy over the last couple of decades. It could never have been predicted. I wanted to ask you your energy options for the next decade. First for heavy industry, and second for the rural districts.
Energy security remains a major issue. We have a huge shortfall. We want to, in fact, increase at least 4 times than what we did in the last 5 years. And for energy, it's important that there is not dependence on one source, but increased dependence on one. Fossil fuels remains the largest source, which is also the hydrocarbons. But to reduce their dependence, new and conventional energy sources have to be there, where India has a dedicated ministry for solar, wind and renewable energy sources, which does include also biofuel sector. But biofuels, I would like to add a word of caution, we're not for the diversion of food for fuel. That augments or aggravates the global food security. What we look at are those biofuels which are non-edible. We have our own, other countries have agricultural base, so that's a big subject in itself. But also at civilian nuclear energy. We want to be in a position to generate at least 20,000 megawatts by 2020. We have 10 new projects coming up. We are talking to other countries. We have negotiated with France, with Russia, with United States of America, of course. That was the first. We spearheaded this new initiative. And nuclear energy is going to form a significant component of our energy security strategy, because it is clean energy, it is replenishable energy. You also referred to complemented economic growth. I didn't mention, but We were growing at plus 9%. We have slipped, but we are crawling back to 7%. We hope to take it to beyond 8% by 2010 again.
Thank you so much, Excellency.
Minister Sharma, Jacob Kirkegaard here from the Peterson Institute. Thank you very much for your very eloquent description of India's historical and present commitment to engagement with the rest of the world. And I was wondering if I could link that desire to engage with the rest of the world with one of the current processes that you did not talk so much about, but I believe that will require India's engagement. That's obviously that one, that of current ongoing climate change negotiations leading up to the Copenhagen conference in December. And I was wondering if you could describe to us here today the principles that will guide your government's engagement with that process in the coming months.
Well, climate change, it's true that I didn't refer, but in passing, when I said the nuclear cooperation will help us in addressing the twin challenge of climate change and energy security. Well, climate change has been a matter of concern for all. We had come out with an action plan which the Prime Minister of India had unveiled on the 30th of June last year. And that's an ambitious action plan and a workable action plan. We are working on that. There are many firsts which India has already taken as initiatives even before this action plan. We will send you a copy of that. We will be taking that action plan also to the next summit. We are also clear that all countries have a commitment, shared but differentiated. We have made a commitment, an honest commitment, that our per capita emissions of greenhouse gases will never exceed the lowest of the per capita emissions of any developed country. That is a commitment which India has made. We are reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. Even for public transport, India has introduced the CNG. Initially it was the judiciary which intervened, then also the administration. And we are with the rest of the world in doing what should be done to arrest this tide. One thing I would like to add here, that when we move forward on the issue of climate change, the developmental needs of the poor countries must be borne in mind. We must not try to look for a solution which stymies development and perpetuates poverty. That is important. Therefore, it is an imperative that countries which have resources and technologies, or new technologies which are environment friendly, which will help in saving this planet, we should together make one statement. We will transfer those technologies free of any cost to the poor countries, least developed countries, who do not have any resources even to adapt, let alone mitigate. That should be done, and also the resources. Because so far, statements are made. Turn of the century came the Millennium Summit. Read the declaration. That what we shall do by 2015. Eradication of poverty, malnutrition, education. Nothing has been addressed. And the issue of climate change can never be addressed as long as the issue of poverty is not addressed. And it is immaterial which country is burning a hole, without naming any country. We are not, at least in that league. But particularly when you look at poor countries, some countries may have resources and needs. Energy consumptions have to be brought down, new technologies to be made available. But wherever a hole is burnt, the hole is burnt. It affects you and me, each one of us. So I think this is again an area where a very open and fair approach is required. I do remember talking to my interlocutors as foreign minister. And very serious conversation was on a joint commission with one of the developed countries. And the argument was that why should we make available this technology to X or Y country in Africa? They have to pay for it. I said, then you be where you are. Then let's not talk. Either we together make that available. We will have to do that. Whether we create a global fund for that. We should think on those lines. Countries like India are in a position to adapt, to mitigate, and to innovate. Other countries too are. But they are countries so poor, for them, the time has not come to think of climate change. For them to think of 2 square meals is enough.
We have 5 minutes. I'm going to turn to Jeff Schott first.
Jeffrey Schott with the Peterson Institute. I'd like to follow up on those very eloquent remarks about climate change. There are 2 areas of which climate change will affect your responsibilities for trade. One is the threat that as countries develop their national plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that there will be pressure from political constituencies to impose border measures to safeguard the competitiveness or to protect their domestic industries that will incur new regulatory mandates. And it would be very useful in the context of the multilateral negotiations to try to extend the standstill to those types of provisions so that the climate regime could be developed to help the poor in other countries. But there is another area where you will be directly involved in negotiations, and that is on the topic of environmental goods and services. Where India and the United States and other major trading nations will need to take actions to try to increase the availability of these resources around the world. And I wondered if you could offer some comments on what approach you might take to that aspect of the Doha negotiations.
You see, there are 2 issues when it comes to the domestic constituency. One is the development and the eradication of poverty. That in any case, for any country which is in that league, those are areas which have to be addressed. At the same time, developing and making available the new technologies. India is in the process of developing many environment-friendly technologies in various sectors, which is universally known. And that is being encouraged. There is a lot of R&D which is going on. Our action plan, I wonder if you have seen it, but I will ask the ambassador here to make available our action plan in what we are doing. When we make our presentation in the Copenhagen, we'll be very clear. And trust me, even when it comes to the trading goods, we will not be found wanting when it comes to working with other countries to meet this challenge.
The last question is at the microphone. Make it short. We're almost out of time.
Thank you so much for speaking today, Minister Sharma. I have a question for you about green special economic zones. As part of the U.S.-India energy dialogue, I've heard some talk about green special economic zones being promoted in Haryana by Reliance. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what that would involve and what the Ministry of Commerce is doing to promote more such zones.
Well, the economic zones are meant to create those heavens where they produce what is 100% exported. As a result, they have duty exemptions. They do not pay the duties which the domestic industry would otherwise pay if it's not 100% export oriented. In addition to that, when such zones come up, then infrastructure is also built, dwelling units come up. One of the priorities is to make them as green as possible, and when it comes to utilization of land, not to use cultivable land, but land which is shrubland, wasteland, to use that as a matter of policy. But those who are landowners, to make them stakeholders, not only to give them compensation, but also employment, training, but a long-term stake in the projects which come up. Thank you.